First contact and underestimation. The Vaxian Empire had dominated the Orion Arm for over 50,000 years. Their sleek, crystalline vessels were feared throughout 17 star systems, and their advanced technology had conquered challenges that most species could barely comprehend. Grand Admiral Ixora stood on the observation deck of the Imperial flagship Eternal Vision, her segmented exoskeleton gleaming under the ambient light as she gazed at the holographic display of a small blue planet. "Quite unremarkable," she commented, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the swirling clouds and vast oceans of Earth. Yet another water world with carbon-based life forms. What makes this one worthy of our attention? Science Director. Science Director Valen moved forward, his slender frame almost delicate compared to the Admiral's battle-hardened physique. "Appearances can be deceiving, Grand Admiral. Our long-range scans detected unusual electromagnetic emissions, primitive communications technology, but arranged in patterns suggesting a level of intelligence that warrants investigation." "Intelligence alone is hardly rare," Ixora countered, mandibles clicking in mild annoyance. "We've catalogued over 300 sentient species." "Indeed, but these creatures, they call themselves humans, have exhibited something else entirely." Valen's antennae quivered with excitement. "They've survived conditions that would have extinguished most evolving civilizations. Multiple ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, pandemic diseases. Yet they persist and rebuild. Their resilience is fascinating." Ixora's interest peaked slightly. The Vaxian Empire had built its dominance on adaptability. Their own species had evolved from insects that survived the cataclysmic destruction of their original homeworld. Resilience is valuable. Still, without advanced technology, they pose no threat or benefit to the Empire. "Perhaps," Valen inclined his head respectfully. "However, I request permission to conduct a more thorough study. These humans have advanced from stone tools to rudimentary space travel in less than 10,000 years, a developmental acceleration almost unheard of." After a moment's consideration, Ixora nodded. "Granted, but maintain stealth protocols. No contact with the species until we determine their potential usefulness." For 6 Earth months, the Vaxians observed humanity covertly. Cloaked scout ships hovered over major cities, research stations monitored communications, and infiltration drones gathered biological samples. With each passing week, Science Director Valen's reports grew more animated, while Grand Admiral Ixora's skepticism gradually transformed into intrigue. "Their adaptability exceeds initial projections," Valen reported during their weekly briefing. "Humans have established settlements in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to scorching deserts, from mountaintops to underwater research stations. They survive radiation levels that would kill most species, recover from injuries that should be fatal, and demonstrate cognitive flexibility that allows them to solve novel problems with remarkable efficiency." "You seem increasingly enamored with these creatures, Director," Ixora observed dryly. "Are they truly exceptional, or have you simply been isolated in deep space too long?" Valen's exoskeleton flushed slightly, the equivalent of a Vaxian blush. "I assure you, Admiral, my assessment is objective. Consider their medical technology, primitive by our standards, yet they've extended their natural lifespan by nearly 50% in just 2 centuries. Their bodies can recover from trauma that would require advanced regeneration technology for most species, and their psychological resilience. Psychological resilience. Yes, Valen's voice lowered with something akin to reverence. They endure emotional and mental trauma that would break most sentient minds, yet continue functioning. They call it human spirit or determination, an almost inexplicable drive to survive against all odds." Ixora's compound eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "This warrants further investigation. What do you propose?" "Direct study," Valen replied immediately. "I recommend we select diverse specimens representing different adaptations within their species. With your permission, I've already identified ideal candidates." The holographic display shifted to show 4 humans, a woman with dark hair and weathered skin, a massive man with ebony skin and powerful muscles, a pale, slender woman with intelligent eyes, and an older man with steady hands and a contemplative expression. Elena Torres, deep-sea researcher and survival expert. Valen indicated the first human. She's survived 3 shipwrecks and once endured 40 days alone on an uninhabited island. Kwame Okonkwo, structural engineer specializing in disaster zones. He's pulled survivors from collapsed buildings and worked in radiation-contaminated areas without protection. Dr. Mai Lin, astrophysicist and former space station commander. Her body has adapted to zero gravity and radiation exposure. And Dr. James Holden, trauma surgeon who's performed life-saving operations in war zones under extreme conditions. An interesting selection, Ixora admitted. Very well. Proceed with the acquisition, but maintain absolute secrecy. The High Council doesn't need to know about this, yet. 3 days later, 4 unconscious humans lay in specialized containment chambers aboard the Eternal Vision. The abductions had been flawlessly executed, with no evidence left behind on Earth. As the humans began to regain consciousness, Science Director Valen watched eagerly through observation screens, while Grand Admiral Ixora maintained a more reserved interest. Elena was the first to fully awaken, immediately cataloging her surroundings with remarkable clarity for someone who had been sedated and transported to an alien vessel. Instead of panic, she demonstrated focused attention, checking her physical condition before examining the containment chamber. Fascinating, Valen whispered. Her stress hormones are elevated, but her cognitive functions remain intact. Most species would be incapacitated by terror in such circumstances. When all 4 humans were conscious, Valen initiated first contact protocol. The transparent walls of their individual chambers allowed them to see each other and their alien captors for the first time. Their reactions defied Vaxian expectations. If you're going to dissect us, I suggest starting with me, Dr. Holden stated calmly, stepping forward in his chamber. I have the most medical value, and I'd rather the others have more time. Kwame pressed his palm against the barrier, testing its strength rather than recoiling from the aliens. These walls are unlike any material I've encountered, some kind of crystalline polymer composite. Dr. Lin studied the Vaxians themselves, her gaze analytical. Your morphology suggests evolution from arthropod ancestors, likely in a high-oxygen environment. Fascinating exoskeletal development. Elena simply watched, her eyes missing nothing, body poised for action despite the hopelessness of their situation. They're assessing us, Ixora realized with surprise, not begging for mercy or collapsing in terror. They're analyzing their captors and surroundings. As I predicted, Valen couldn't keep the excitement from his voice. Shall we begin the tests? The first phase of testing focused on basic physiological responses. The humans were subjected to varying atmospheric conditions, temperature fluctuations, and gravity changes. While uncomfortable, none of these proved particularly challenging to the captives. The Vaxians steadily increased the intensity. Radiation exposure came next, followed by pressure tests, sleep deprivation, and nutrient restriction. Throughout each trial, the humans demonstrated not only survival but adaptation. Their bodies adjusted to new conditions with increasing efficiency, and more remarkably, they began to cooperate despite their isolation. Dr. Holden would call medical advice to the others through the chamber walls. Elena shared survival techniques for conserving energy and managing pain. Kwame developed a communication system using tapped rhythms when vocal communication was restricted, and Dr. Lin calculated patterns in the testing schedule that helped them prepare for each new challenge. They're not just individual specimens anymore, Valen noted with concern on the 10th day. They're functioning as a collective organism, sharing information and strategies. Is this a threat? Ixora questioned, mandibles clicking with unease. Not yet, Valen replied. But their rate of adaptation exceeds our models. Their cellular structures are changing, becoming more efficient at oxygen utilization, toxin processing, and damage repair. It's as if the very act of testing them is accelerating their evolution. Evolution doesn't work that way, Ixora stated flatly. For most species, no, Velen agreed. But these humans, they're different. I believe we should move to the next phase. The isolation trials. Yes. We need to understand if this cooperative behavior is enhancing their resilience or if their adaptation is purely physiological. That night, as the humans slept in their chambers, the Vaxians prepared for a new phase of experimentation, unaware that their subjects were already several steps ahead. Through Dr. Lin's mathematical analysis and Quame's engineering insights, they had identified patterns in the ship's power fluctuations. Through Alina's keen observation, they had mapped the movements of their captors. And through Dr. Holden's understanding of the aliens' biology, gained from careful observation during examinations, they had begun to formulate a plan. The humans weren't just adapting to survive the Vaxians' tests. They were evolving to escape them. Evolution and revelation. Day 15 marked a turning point in the Vaxian experiments. The 4 humans were separated and placed in specialized environmental chambers designed to push their adaptability to its limits. Alina found herself in a hyperbaric chamber where the pressure steadily increased to levels that should crush human organs. Quain was subjected to gravitational forces that made every movement an excruciating effort. Dr. Lin endured rapidly fluctuating radiation levels that would cause cellular breakdown in most organisms. Dr. Holden faced perhaps the cruelest test, a neurostimulation field designed to trigger and amplify pain receptors throughout his body. The Vaxians watched in growing astonishment as their subjects not only survived, but demonstrated unprecedented adaptations. Grand Admiral, you need to see this. Valen's voice carried an unusual tremor as he summoned Ixora to the laboratory. Alina's lung tissue is restructuring in real time. She's developing alveolar modifications similar to deep-sea mammals. Ixora's compound eyes widened as she studied the cellular scans. This is impossible. Genetic adaptation doesn't occur within an individual organism. And yet, we're witnessing it. Valen gestured to another screen showing Quame's musculoskeletal structure. His bone density has increased by 30% in just hours, and his muscle fibers are developing new contractile proteins I've never seen before. What about the others? Dr. Lin's cells have developed enhanced repair mechanisms that neutralize radiation damage almost instantly. And Dr. Holden. Valen's antennae drooped slightly. He's somehow rewiring his own neural pathways to bypass pain signals while maintaining sensory awareness. Ixora's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of serious concern. Are they communicating somehow? This level of coordinated adaptation seems deliberate? Velen finished the thought. I verified there's no possible way they could be in contact. This appears to be an intrinsic human capability. Adaptation accelerated by extreme stress. We need to understand the limits of this ability, Ixora decided. Escalate the testing parameters. Push them until we find their breaking point. For the next 3 days, the Vaxians subjected their human captives to increasingly extreme conditions. The pressure in Alina's chamber reached depths beyond Earth's deepest ocean trenches. Quame endured gravitational forces that would liquefy most organisms. Dr. Lin was exposed to radiation levels comparable to being in close orbit around a neutron star. Dr. Holden's pain simulation reached intensities that the Vaxian systems could barely measure. Yet none of them broke. Instead, something unprecedented occurred. As Science Director Velen monitored Alina's vital signs on the 18th day, he noticed unusual energy patterns emanating from her cellular structure. Grand Admiral, he called urgently. Her body is generating some form of bioelectric field I've never encountered before. Before Ixora could respond, alarms blared throughout the laboratory. Similar energy signatures were detected in all 4 human chambers, growing stronger by the second. Containment protocols at maximum, Ixora ordered, but her command came too late. In Alina's chamber, the reinforced walls, designed to withstand the pressure of gas giant atmospheres, began to vibrate. The hyperbaric systems fluctuated wildly as she opened her eyes, which now glowed with an inner light. With deliberate movements, she placed her palm against the chamber wall, and the supposedly indestructible material began to ripple like water. Throughout the laboratory, similar impossibilities unfolded. Quaim stood upright despite gravitational forces that should have flattened him, his body emanating waves that distorted the very space around him. Dr. Lin hovered several inches above the floor of her chamber, the radiation she had absorbed now radiating outward in controlled pulses. Dr. Holden's neural activity had become so advanced that his thoughts were interfacing directly with the ship's systems, bypassing security protocols with ease. "What's happening?" Ixora demanded, her composure finally fracturing. "How is this possible?" Valen could only stare in scientific awe. "They've evolved beyond our understanding. The extreme conditions, instead of killing them, they've catalyzed some latent potential in human physiology." With a sound like shattering crystal, all 4 containment chambers failed simultaneously. The humans stepped out, their bodies transformed by 18 days of evolutionary pressure that should have taken millions of years. They moved with perfect coordination despite their long separation, converging at the center of the laboratory as stunned Vaxian scientists backed away. "We thank you for your hospitality." The Lina spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship itself. "Your tests have been educational." Vaxian security forces swarmed into the laboratory, weapons trained on the escaped humans. Grand Admiral Ixora raised a limb to halt their advance, recognizing the futility of conventional weapons against beings who had just shattered supposedly impenetrable barriers. "What do you want?" she asked directly, switching to diplomatic protocol. Quaim answered, his deep voice steady despite the newfound power surging through him. "First, we want to understand. Why were we taken? What purpose did these experiments serve?" Scientific inquiry. Valen stepped forward, professional curiosity temporarily overriding his fear. "Your species' resilience is unprecedented in our catalog of over 300 sentient civilizations. We sought to understand its source and limits." "And now?" Dr. Lin asked, her body still emanating controlled pulses of energy that disrupted the ship's sensors. "Having pushed us beyond those limits, what do you intend to do with your discovery?" The question hung in the air as the Vaxians realized the true magnitude of their miscalculation. They had not merely studied human resilience. They had forced an evolutionary leap that transformed their captives into something beyond their comprehension. The High Council would see military applications, Ixora admitted truthfully. Humanity's adaptability, weaponized, would make formidable soldiers. That would be unwise. Dr. Holden spoke for the first time, his consciousness still partly interfaced with the ship's systems. "I can access your historical records. The Vaxian Empire has subjugated 17 systems through superior technology and biological warfare. You intended the same for Earth." "Not immediately," Ixora clarified. "First observation, then limited contact, resource extraction, and eventually absorption into the Empire. Standard protocol for all potentially useful species." Belina stepped forward, and the Admiral involuntarily moved back despite herself. "Here is what will happen instead. You will return us to Earth. Your empire will classify our planet as protected territory, forbidden for colonization or interference." "The High Council would never," Ixora began. "The High Council will accept these terms," Quaim interrupted, the gravitational distortion around him intensifying slightly. "Because the alternative is demonstrating to your empire what humans are truly capable of when threatened." To emphasize his point, he extended one hand toward a nearby console. The advanced Vaxian technology, the pinnacle of 50 millennia of development, crumbled to dust under the focused gravitational field he generated. "We don't seek conflict," Dr. Lin added more gently. "We've accessed your historical records during our evolution. The Vaxian Empire has brought stability to this sector of the galaxy, and in many ways, your rule has been beneficial. We don't wish to destabilize that. But we will defend our home." Dr. Holden finished. And now we have the means to do so effectively. A tense silence filled the laboratory as Grand Admiral Ixora calculated her options. The 4 humans before her represented an unprecedented threat, not just for their current capabilities, but for what they implied about humanity as a whole. If 4 random specimens could evolve so dramatically under pressure, what might billions achieve under similar circumstances? I will present your terms to the High Council, she finally agreed, with my recommendation for acceptance. A wise decision. Elena nodded. Now, we require a vessel to return home. And what of your condition? Science Director Valen couldn't contain his scientific curiosity despite the circumstances. These evolutionary changes, will you maintain them? Share them with your species. The 4 humans exchanged glances, communicating in some silent way the Vaxians couldn't perceive. We will retain what we've gained, Quaim answered carefully. As for sharing, we'll proceed cautiously. Humanity may not be ready for such rapid advancement. But we will be vigilant, Dr. Lin added. Should the Vaxian Empire or any other cosmic power approach our world with conquest in mind, they will find us prepared. One final question, Ixora said as preparations were made for the humans' departure. After everything we've done, the abduction, the experiments, the pain we've caused, why not seek revenge? Why not use your new abilities to destroy this vessel and everyone aboard? Dr. Holden smiled slightly. Because that, Admiral, is the true strength of humanity. Not just our ability to survive against all odds, but our capacity for mercy even when it isn't deserved. Our evolution wasn't just physical, Elena explained. With enhanced neural capacity came greater understanding. We see the patterns of history more clearly now, cycles of violence and retribution that span millennia. We choose to break that cycle. 3 days later, a small Vaxian scout ship approached Earth's atmosphere. Inside, 4 transformed humans prepared to return to a world that would never know how close it had come to becoming another conquest of the Vaxian Empire. Instead, in the great archives of the Empire, Earth would be marked with a designation no other world had ever received. Approach with caution. Indigenous species demonstrates unlimited evolutionary potential. As the ship descended through clouds toward the night side of Earth, Elena gazed at the scattered lights of human civilization below. They look so fragile from here, she mused. All those people, unaware of what exists beyond their atmosphere, both the threats and the possibilities. They'll learn in time, Quaim replied. And when they do, we'll be there to guide them. Dr. Lin nodded in agreement. Our journey is just beginning. The question is, do we awaken humanity to its potential now, or wait until they're ready to handle it? We wait, Dr. Holden said firmly. But we prepare, because somewhere out there, beyond the Vaxian Empire, other forces exist, and not all will be as easily deterred. As the scout ship landed in a remote forest clearing, the 4 humans stepped onto their home planet, forever changed yet resolved in their purpose. Humanity would continue its slow journey toward the stars, unaware of the guardians now walking among them, living proof that when pushed to their limits, humans don't just survive, they transcend.